Hello there, and welcome to Gina Gardiner and Friends. We've got a great show for you today, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to introduce to you David Liddle. Now, David's been a great friend for many, many years, and although he's in the financial industry, we're going to be talking about his attitude to how you enable children to build resilience. He does a huge amount of work with the Scouts. He's got 2 young children of his own, and he has a unique, I think, approach to helping children stand up for themselves, have great confidence. And he's going to share with us today some of his amazing stories. So David, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, how are you?
I'm feeling great. Thank you very much.
Good.
So just give us a little bit of history about yourself and, where you've got to now.
I did a biology degree many years ago. Spent what seemed like a year doing this with a pipette. Decided I was never going to do that again. Great experience in doing research. I then started to work for a financial services firm. Since then, done lots of different things. Got married, had 2 kids, which is probably the biggest change of everything, and kind of got very much back into scouting. And outdoor sports later on in life. Say later on in life. I still feel like I'm kind of 21, but clearly I'm not anymore.
No, it's interesting, is it? Because I can remember conversations when we first met about, the need to take exercise and getting fit. And yet you do some quite extreme being fit things, don't you? Share with our listeners the sort of things that you get up to.
I've done lots of different things. It's actually quite strange because just picking up that in the conversation, if you look, when we first met, exercise was something to do to get fit. Now it's just something that's become generally part of my life and part of the experience. And I mean, I've done lots. I've done London Marathon lots of times. I've done lots of 100-mile cycles. I've done a number of ultras. So 50-mile runs. I think the most extreme thing I've done was a wing walk. That was a great experience. For
those who have no idea what a wing walk is, I think you need to be really clear what we're talking about. Madness, as far as I'm concerned, but exhilarating from your point of view.
You climb up and stand on the top of a biplane, which then takes off, flies around, goes up and down a bit. And then lands. And interesting, the 2 dangerous points of that are the takeoff and the landing, because the weight of the engine, you're fairly forward in the geography of the plane. And it's actually interesting because if you think that going up and down on a roller coaster is a big feeling, when you stand on top of a plane, it's like 1,000 feet. That's a huge feeling. It's great. Really interesting experience.
I'm sure it is. It's not one that I think that I'm going to try. I don't mind being in the plane. I've never really considered being on the plane something that I want to do.
Yeah, it's good fun.
But for you, what was it that made the difference? Why did you do it in the first place? And then having done it, what was the difference it made to you in terms of how you viewed your life and the world?
Well, everybody sits there and says going to a marathon is a really big deal. And for a lot of people, it is a big deal. It's something that you should certainly work up to. But a lot of experiences are things that people take steps towards. So if you look at Wim Hof, who's on TV at the minute with his cold treatment exercise, it's really interesting because you've got people who are stepping in who've done nothing and then basically are plunging themselves into ice cold water. That's going to be a fairly significant jump. But in reality, if you take steps along a process throughout your life, then it's a gradual kind of phasing in of experience. It's the best way to describe it is it's an expansion in the depth of the experience that you actually have. So it's not actually a big deal to go out and do it if you've had the experience.
Yes.
There's the guy who, Speedo Mick, who I will introduce you to, who has walked the length of the UK in a pair of Speedos, so basically in his underpants. And he was only able to do that in the middle of winter because he'd acclimatized himself, he trained his body to deal with the cold. And it comes across as quite an extreme thing to do, and it is, but he was able to do that through training. So a lot of the things that I've done are through experience, as opposed to necessarily going out and just doing it, having done no preparation.
So how do you prepare for being on top of an aeroplane?
It's just something I wanted to do.
Okay, as you do.
And the commitment was actually in the booking it.
Okay. And having done it, has that, and all of these things that you've done, what's been the impact upon you and how you feel about life?
I did a course a while back, and one of the bits on the courses was about body language and posture and how you approach experience. And you can't see it on a screen, but if you stand with your shoulders back, arms down by your side, and your palms backwards, so your palms facing backwards, it's a very different experience to if you have your palms facing forwards. The act of having your palms facing forwards opens up your body language to accepting an experience in. And so if you approach it in that way, it seems really weird, but I did it on top of the plane, and it made a massive difference mentally, because in the physical rotation of your arms and you're opening up, you're accepting the experience positively in, and you're going with it. Whereas if you do that, that's a fear mechanism.
We're on radio, so David's crossing.
Oh, sorry.
Crossing his arms. So the thing is, if you open up your shoulders and your arms as if you're about to embrace someone,
correct,
rather than crossing your arms against your chest in order to protect yourself against something or someone, there's a very different feeling to that, isn't there?
Completely.
One is open, come on, bring it on, and the other is, oh no, I can't cope with this. And
it's a big mental difference, the physiological difference of standing with an open stance as opposed to a closed stance makes a massive difference mentally. And I've used that since, when I've gone on to do running ultras and things, when I've been absolutely knackered, and just accepting where you are, opening the body language. It's really strange. It makes a big difference subconsciously, which just makes a difference to how the eventual activity.
I think our posture and our body language make a difference to everything. I know with clients who are feeling depressed, for example, that the first thing, if you change the physiology, get them to stand up, shoulders back, as if they own the room. I use archetypes, the archetype of a royal or a warrior. Their mood shifts. You have to do other things to keep it that way, but
Absolutely.
It's a great starting point. I know that you do an enormous amount with the Scouts. So first of all, is that something that you've done all your life? Why the Scouts?
I was brought up. I joined the Cubs up in Scotland when I was very young, and I did everything all the way up to kind of county level as a young kid. I then moved into London and stopped all of that. Had other interests, shall we say? And then now that I've got kids, I've got back involved in the last 5 years, and really enjoy it. I think adults have got a lot. I've got a lot to give. I think adults volunteering in that space, especially if they have kids, is hugely healthy. We have a lot to give. We have a lot to learn from us and from our kids and from other people's kids. I think it's hugely healthy.
I think that's very true. And belonging to something where children are and young people are given opportunities that perhaps they wouldn't otherwise experience is incredibly enriching. And I know from my time as a principal of a school that giving children the opportunity to shine in a variety of ways was just so important. They might not find maths or English easy, but they could be great at sports or drama or singing or something. And it's finding that thing that is the key to unlocking confidence, I think, so important. Talk to me about the sort of things that you've been doing with the Scouts, because I know you've introduced some different things that the children have been involved in.
My attitude is very much about the experience. So I think one thing I have learned about doing different sports and outdoor activities is that it's really important to experience things. It's important to get out and experience the hot and the cold, get out in the wind and the rain, get out and experience what it's like to be wide awake first thing in the morning and extremely tired at the end of the night, having actually done something physical. And it's really good to do that in different environments, whether that's throwing yourself in a lake, or going up a mountain, or going sailing, or even sitting around a campfire. We sat around a campfire recently with about 130 kids, and it was amazing. Those who turned up on their own, they were really kind of self-conscious about turning up, and being kind of the only one from their group, were the ones who were actually stood up on their own, singing their lungs out, in front of 130, 140 people. It was amazing. Just to see that transformation, and to see kids really coming into their own, in an environment that they didn't know they were going to be put in. It wasn't necessarily manufactured. It was just another part of the experience of the weekend. But it's amazing, if you put the same young people through the same different experiences, they will all shine at different things. It doesn't mean any one is any better or any worse than another. It just, they all have different strengths.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were involved in a discussion last week about dealing with adversity. And out of that discussion, both of us, I think, agreed that developing resilience was really important. And the earlier that children could develop resilience and confidence, the better able they would be to deal with the adversity that life inevitably brings at times. What for you do you think is, how do you build resilience in children? You know, what are the ways that you would do that? Let's do that at a scouting level, because we're going to talk about parenting a bit later.
Young people need to be given experiences. They need to get out and do it. There's no point in reading a book. You can learn from a book, obviously, but if we're talking about experience, which is the physical and the mental experience of being in the great outdoors, they need to do it. They need to do it at different ages. They need to experience the good and the bad. They need to know what it's like to feel cold. Once a young person understands what cold actually is, they will always dress up. They'll always be prepared, but they need to learn. You know, if a parent continues to pack all of their stuff before they turn up at camp, they don't learn, because they don't experience that.
No.
And it's that little bit of experience that then they build on and build on and build on. And then you'll get somebody in their early 20s going up Everest, or, you know, trekking to the pole. That's where it starts. It's the little steps along the way. It's
my view that adults underestimate the capacity that children have, even quite young children, and that they are, in these days, they are so closeted and so kept comfortable that they very rarely have the opportunity to deal with challenge. Now, of course, that needs to be age appropriate, and it needs to, we're not talking about putting children in so much danger that they're going to get badly hurt, or they're going to be vulnerable to predators, for example, human and animal. But it is important, I think, that children learn to manage things when there's a problem. If somebody always solves it for them, how are they going to learn?
Absolutely. There is a very clear line between challenging and damaging. Definitely. We've had kids out for survival weekend, where the parents have openly said, where the kids have said, I want to go home, ring the parents, because that's what you need to do. And the parents have said, look, you know, make them tough it out, you know, for a while. But there is a very clear line between making them tough it out and, you know, learn and become more resilient. And actually, this is now time to call it a day. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that.
And I think the other thing is that when it is time to call it a day, that children learn to deal with that. That's just as important as actually recognizing that you can tough it out and be okay, is that it's not the end of the world if you have reached the end of your rope and you say enough is enough. And for me, it's that challenge between teaching children to win graciously and to lose graciously, and recognize that it doesn't make them a bad person, but it is part of life's experience.
Yeah, so it's positive to be able to sit there and say, I've had enough. I now need to withdraw from this activity or this exercise, and learn from it. Nothing wrong with that at all.
No. But David, you've got 2 children. Their ages are?
9 and 4 and a bit, nearly 5.
Now, I know that during lockdown that in the UK, children weren't going to school and were being homeschooled and living sort of 24/7 at home. And I know you had some very interesting approaches to keeping your children entertained. Be really grateful if you could share some of those.
Yeah, we did lots. Looking back, actually, it was a very restrictive time, but we actually did a lot. We became hugely inventive. We did full-on camping. So we emptied a room in the house and had tents up and camping stoves and kind of camping lights and camping chairs and a ukulele. We did proper camping.
Just to interrupt you, can I just explain that you live in a flat, in an apartment, don't you? You don't live in a house. There's no garden.
No. No. So we did abseiling. I rigged some ropes up into the roof. We did abseiling down through the roof. That was interesting. We did loads of things. I hung up my paragliding harness. So we tried to do a green screen. That didn't work very well, but they enjoyed swinging in the paragliding harness from the roof hole. It was actually incredible how inventive we could be. We built a slide down the stairs. That went a lot faster than was anticipated. That was interesting. And then we also built a zip line from the front of the flat to the back, a proper zip line, from the front of the flat to the back. Which it was all good fun. It was just repurposing mainly climbing equipment and camping equipment that we had. And it was a good laugh. I think we all enjoyed it.
It sounds amazing. And those people who are listening to that, please don't try this unless you actually have the expertise to rig it up properly. It could be very dangerous. I know you spend a lot of time outdoors with your children. The sort of activities that you do outside, and why do you think that's so important?
I think you get a very different connection outside to inside. So I would rather sit around a campfire toasting marshmallows than I would watching TV. TV is just brain rot for me. I think it's nice to be able to sit outside and look at the stars and just experience what's going on, the smells, the sights, the sounds, whether you're on a beach in the middle of nowhere or on the top of a mountain, or even the middle of the city. You can have just as good an experience actually in the middle of a city if you take time to look what's around you and what's going on. I think a lot of it is actually taking stock of what's going on and where you are, and what's happening in the world around you. You don't necessarily need to go to the top of Everest to give a young child an experience.
I think it's really interesting. From my perspective, there are a number of things that I think are going on which make a difference. And one is that you and your children are spending real quality time together. That it's not the kids are on their phone or their tablet or their computer or watching television, that there is real meaningful interaction going on between you and your kids at that time. And I think that's something that is so much missing in so many lives, because parents believe that they are completely time poor. But I think
also a lot of parents believe they can't do stuff. And in reality, that's so far from the truth.
Yeah.
I think parents are so much more capable of doing lots of fun stuff. It's just really easy to get lost in the day-to-day work and all the other dross that is in our lives. Sometimes it's actually just good fun. I mean, there was a lot of positive came out of the lockdown and COVID. There was a lot of fun had. There was a lot of very different connection. And there's been a lot of longer lasting connections that will be positive moving forward. I'm not saying I'd want to necessarily do it all again, but there was a lot of good that came of that.
I find it interesting that lots of the activities that you talk about actually don't cost anything other than time.
No. Yeah.
And I think for many parents who are on low incomes or who have a challenge, getting out into the local park or the local woods and allowing kids to splash in puddles and build a camp and do those sort of things the value of that time together and children experimenting and exploring is just, it's hard to to quantify what a positive impact that has on both the relationship that the children have with you and also with themselves.
It gives them massive practical skills. I mean, silly things like, why do you wear a pair of wellies if you're going to go into muddy countryside? They learn, they learn to actively elect to make those decisions. They learn to decide to take a warm coat or decide to leave a warm coat and take the risk of being chilly. It's about them learning and to experience and make decisions about the environment around them and how they do things. It's a big learning experience, and unless you get out and give them the opportunity to do that, they don't. No. So you end up with young adults who just don't have the experience to go out on their own.
Yeah, I was always struck when I was a principal of the statistics of children who are most likely to be run over and badly injured on the road, with those children leaving. In the UK, they leave primary school at 11 and they go to secondary school. I'm not quite sure what the system is in the US, but that shift between parents taking children to school and delivering them at the gate and them going to school on their own and having to use public transport and to just walk and cross roads. And it was because children had not learned to manage traffic and crossing the roads safely. And one of the things that struck me is that we expect our children to make huge jumps without those little steps that you've talked about in terms of preparing them so that they understand the dangers and they understand how to deal with them. And I think your approach enables young people, both as a parent and as a scouter, to actually negotiate those small steps in a safe way. And that's what makes them so valuable.
Yeah, I think we forget the benefit of the little steps. And it's the little steps. If you keep making lots of little steps, you get big steps.
Yeah.
It sounds a stupidly simplistic thing to say, but it's true.
Yeah.
People don't get to where they're going necessarily in one day.
Yeah. So the summer holidays are coming. Have you got any plans of things that you are going to be doing with your children in order to carry the journey forward?
I will not be waiting till the summer holidays.
Okay.
That I can tell you. So yeah, we just want to get out and experience different things. So next weekend we're going down to the South Coast. I fully plan on getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, which will. The good thing about doing that is because everybody else wants to be in bed, so it's peace and quiet.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take paddleboard down probably with either my daughter or my nephew at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've worked out what the tide times are, so we'll drive up the river, dump the car, jump in, go out with the tide, and then come back in and have breakfast on the harbour, which is just such a lovely experience. And even if the weather's not, fantastic, it's beautiful to be out in the water first thing in the morning. We just need to be aware of the surroundings and make sure we're aware of I've mentioned tide times and things. I check all that sort of thing to make sure that what I'm doing is safe and appropriate.
Yes.
If it was just me, it'd be one thing. If I'm taking a child out, especially if it's someone else's, that's a different conversation. But there's so much that can be done that doesn't need to cost anything. You can turn a small trip into a really great adventure.
I think it's such a way of thinking that enables young people and, interestingly, the adults who are involved with it too, to grow and to develop a very different perspective on life. And there's a lot talked about mental health and the impact of activity on mental health. And I think it's important not to underestimate how positive an impact that can have.
I think it's having a can-do attitude with stuff as opposed to not. Yes. There's a general saying there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing, and it's so true. Yeah. If you see people who walk to the Antarctic, they don't sit and just go out on a nice day. They go out in the worst weather.
Yeah.
They deliberately go out in the worst weather. The whole kind of army mantra about train hard and then do the exercise easy is so true.
Yeah.
It's all about the experience. And if you mollycoddle and don't get out into the experience, it just doesn't work. It's never going to be positive because you're never taking those steps forward.
Yeah. Well, we've reached the end of our time. I'd like to say a huge thank you. Before we go, if somebody's interested in scouting, where do they find out about it?
The best thing to do is find out where your local group or organization is just if you just Google Scouts, you will find a local group to you. And the best thing to do is be proactive, pick up the phone. Don't necessarily assume that other volunteers will chase you. You be proactive, contact people, offer your help, support your kids getting involved with your time, and doors will open incredibly quickly.
It sounds like really great advice. And I just like to say a huge thank you for being on the show. So thanks so much for joining me, David. And thank you for joining me, listeners. And I look forward to seeing you.
Lovely to see you.
Thanks, Dave. Bye-bye now.